So over the years, in all of our lives, we've come across people that, through one way or another, that have an impact. Joe worked in the financial industry. He was a broker when I first met Joe, and I first met Joe through stories before I actually met the person. So he was more of a legend by the time I met Joe than an actual human being.
We knew that Joe had moved to town because we saw the fireworks on the night of his wedding. And we were up on the mountain, and I was looking out the window, and I thought, whoa! And all these fireworks are going up in the air. And again, it was an example of Joe, did his fireworks, and why not? Of course, I don't blame him. He was celebrating. It was a joyful occasion, but he didn't call the fire department. But that was a lot of people's sort of initial experience with Joe was the fireworks display.
Well, I think we heard about him when he bought the Riverside Farm and then began to renovate the property. And a lot of activity for a small town like Pittsfield. There was a lot of hustle and bustle in the village when that was going on.
The yoga studio, before it was the yoga studio, was the Butcher. And there was a little bit of controversy with that because that was kind of the hangout for a lot of the old-timers and the local people of Pittsfield. So there was only two places to eat in Pittsfield, which was the general store and the Butcher. And so when Joe bought both of those places, I think in Joe's mind was, well, we don't need both places because we could have the Butcher in the general store and then funnel the same customers into one business. He changed the whole layout. The merchandise went from beer to organic wine, fruits and vegetables to organic fruits and vegetables. And so there was definitely a split in Joe's lifestyle where his dad would be very business oriented and his mom would be very just spiritual. He's always out hiking, always in the woods. He tries not to be in the office as much as he could because he just loves to be outdoors. He loves to have his hands in the dirt. Other than that, he did have a screensaver of a red barn on his computer for about 15 years while he worked on Wall Street. So maybe there's a connection of something that he wanted to eventually do.
Everyone dreams of going to Wall Street, making lots of money and retiring. Very few do. Very few can leave the sharks down on Wall Street once they get a taste of the money. And we got a taste, and that was enough for us, and we decided to come up to the country. We moved here to do this, but the real spark to do it immediately this year came from a woman named Marion Leonard. She lives one town over. She's 92 years old. She saw some of the construction we were doing when we first came here, and she made it a point at 92 to work her way over to this town, call a meeting with me, which we were happy to have, and let me know that everything we were doing was wrong and we were ruining Vermont.
When I started to talk to him, he told me that he instinctively liked me because I reminded him of his mother.
And I really wanted to get this farm up and running and built while she was alive. And so that was the impetus to really push and get this going this year.
They're all kind of doing it from scratch. They don't quite know what to do or how to do it. But my advice to them is if they work in harmony with nature and the earth community of animals, plants, and they won't be able to go wrong, and they'll learn ways of doing things that they've never thought of before.
But if you take the long view and you look at that bird's eye picture, you have to maintain biodiversity on the earth throughout all of its ecosystems. If you cut down the big trees, destroy the water tables, the entire water table by having open areas where there aren't big trees, and create desertification and soil erosion, and destroy biodiversity, the human race, it's just a matter of time. In a few generations, we won't be here anymore. It's that simple.
Well, my name's Chris Orris. I'm from Toledo, Ohio. And I just graduated with a degree in environmental science, and my parents were like, you know, you have to have an idea of what you're going to do after school. Like one day driving to work, I was just like, you know, I'd really like to walk the Appalachian Trail. Joe ended up offering me a job because like I was working in the garden and I had a very small amount of gardening experience, and I think he just saw that I was like willing to like work hard, and he needed someone to run the organic farm, so it just was kind of a good fit. Yeah, at first I was really skeptical, but I mean, you know, a lot of new ideas. I mean, it's not a brand new idea. It's just it's a different idea, and a lot of people think it's silly because it'll be a lot of work to put in these raised beds, and it'll be a lot of work to kind of like till them up manually. But, you know, I think that it's a good idea just because, you know, it is almost like a large earth box, and I think the plants will grow better.
Irrigation was another issue. How do we water these plants? Do we put in a well and then pump water out of the ground to water the plants? Or do we tap into a pond that we have 1,000 feet away and just run a gravity feed to the garden with a couple of valves that we could open or close depending on the need of the garden? It made sense to go with the pond, run the gravity feed. So we rigged up a pretty elaborate irrigation system that reaches every plant, is gravity fed from the pond, is controlled via valves. Each row has its own valve, so if the tomatoes need a little more water that week, we can open the tomatoes and shut the squash. Took a while. It was an upfront investment, but boy, it's made our life easier so far.
The irrigation system is going great. What you see here is that there's the blue tubes that are feeding another. It's set up with a T, and then there's one tube going up and into the earth boxes. And what that does is it fills in the bottom of the earth box, and there's a spill when that gets too full on the bottom, but we have a plug of earth that then soaks up water into the main body of the earth box, and that continues to water the plants. Even like the tomatoes we found, I mean, the ones in the boxes are catching up with the ones in the ground, and the ones in the grounds were in the ground 3 weeks longer, so everything's turning out well though.
My farmer knows hitchhiking. We're working.
All right. So you started with the trails.
We started with a guy I picked up hitchhiking who was walking from Georgia to Maine. And it turns out he studied permaculture, all this stuff. This was his dream.
Yeah.
And so he entered the Pittsfield vortex, which has abducted other people. And he's now part of Pittsfield.
As these projects go forward, we're going to have to switch for 6 months, where you're going to have to come to New Jersey and teach people how to eat vegetables. I'm going to have to come to Vermont and teach them.
You may never leave.